provisional results, especially from that electronic portal on the IEBC website. Should Kenyans react to this? Should media cover these results, even as we wait for the final ones? What is your take, Javas?
You see, all over the world, projection of results is something that takes place. Whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the UK, projection of results is not a bad thing. Because, generally, it's supposed to cure the gap in anxieties so that people get to know the trend. And that doesn't mean that that is the official result. And that happens everywhere.
Right.
And even the way our law provides for it, that officially it is the IBC that will make all those declarations. So I think there is no bone to pick by, with the media or with the IBC for projecting provisional results as they do the other verification. Now imagine this situation. Let us create this scenario where there is the absence of projection of provisional results. So imagine like a situation since voting on Tuesday, Kenyans have not heard about anything. IBC is just addressing the press, telling them, you know what, we are verifying. We will let you know about the results after verification. Do you know what would have happened in this country? I mean, it would be chaotic. Now the claim would be that there is so much cooking that's happening in the kitchen.
Right.
So this situation of projection of provisional results is something good that demonstrates the trend that Kenyans or the electorate should anticipate possibly how the official results will look like.
All right, good, fair enough. Let's talk about some of the results that have been taken to the people by those projections, and let's talk about what's happening in those gubernatorial races. And I was trying to compile the list of all those elected or politicians elect, and Jubilee have 26 governors, likely, more or less. NASA or DM will have, I think, 13 governors. We'll have one from Maendeleo Chap Chap. We have two from Wiper, which I think they had 4 in the last election. And let me start with you, Hezbon. What do you see happening here?
I think from the results that we've seen trickle in and the ones that have been confirmed, we are seeing a situation where Jubilee as a party, is going to have a commanding presence in Parliament, in the Senate, and of course in the powerful Council of Governors. That is given. And well, it's a good thing in the sense that if you are having a command of all these bodies and you mean well for Kenyans and you've won an election and probably you also have the executive on your, you head the executive, then it will be very easy for you to even implement your manifesto, to have all the promises that you made during the campaign implemented with relatively a lot of ease. But it's also a major cause of concern for the people of Kenya, because ultimately you look at the way our governance is structured, you realize that if you have numbers in Parliament, you control the Council of Governors, and you also head the executive, then there's a way in which you have the executive, you have the oversight authority, you have control of the entity that is supposed to oversight you, and that can be a cause for concern, especially if you look at the other institutions that support a democracy, the judiciary, the media. You may want to ask yourself then that to what extent can the media then exercise its watchdog role? And if they go beyond what the executive is comfortable with, it's only prudent that the executive talks to the legislature and they make laws then to tame the media,
but then
which can be a bit
question.
tricky.
Here's a question, Hezbon.
Yes.
Jubilee people would ask you, whose fault is it that Jubilee have numbers? Many people told them that they were going wrong trying to have collapsed parties into one. I would ask you, why didn't others do that so that they can have competition and all that?
They would say that it's not their problem, and that's why I'm saying that if they mean well, it's a good thing. But, that is the assumption that you're making, that Jubilee wins and they have the numbers,
Right.
I think the flip side is an interesting story, because if NASA wins, because, of course, we know these are provisional results, then it means that Kenyans are going to be, served by a very interesting government that has no other way of going about things than the interest of the people, because the oversight will be outside their control, because Jubilee will then, dominate parliament. Then the Council of Governors, again, will be out of their control. And you see, that is a kind of a bright space that you may want to find yourself as a common citizen in this country, where the executive is totally dissociated from the legislature, and the Council of Governors can also stamp its authority without being influenced by the executive.
All right. Dismas, I've been listening to Kenyans talk about these issues and the provisional results that we have. If that is what stands, and even after the IBC declares them, it would show that, like, for example, we have 4 members of parliament, Jubilee members of parliament in Bungoma County, and 4 in Kakamega County, which has been an opposition county. And we have, I think, 3 in Ukambani, 4 in other coast, and such. Would you say that Raila Odinga's core principles, at least Musalia Mudavadi, ANC, CCM's Isaac Ruto, and Wetangula, do you think they failed to deliver the vote that they promised to do?
Well, the expectation was that they were going to deliver 100%. But again, we are still working on provisional results.
Of course.
That even Chebukati himself said they are provisional and they are not official. Now, the question which comes to mind is, you have the chairman of IBC telling you that the figures posted on our website are not official. So you begin to wonder, why are you posting these figures? And a number of civil society players have said that what is being referred to as provisional results are merely numbers, because those numbers are not supported by the 34A and the 34B. When they're supported by 34B, then that's where now they become official results. So even as we're having this conversation, one wonders why IBC is now streaming live the 34Bs that they've already verified, which they've confirmed. One would expect that that's what's supposed to be streamlined, so that we are able to see and begin to understand who is likely to win.
Right.
And in my view, the provisional figures that were being given us, the provisional numbers, were supposed probably to condition Kenyans that we are moving in a particular way, so that Kenyans begin to socialize with a particular aspect of the candidature. That's my understanding. Because why would you want to give us figures, then you do not tell us from which polling stations, from which constituency? And the NASA critics who've gone through those figures are saying there's a particular variation. All the figures, 54, 44, that there's a variation of 11%. And because they are suspicious of IBC, they're claiming that a clever chap has hacked into the system and is playing around with figures. So one would have expected that for Chebukati, the forms which have been verified, 34B, is start streaming them live. And in as much as the nation can be very anxious, it should have prepared us 2 weeks ago.
Was saying, what do you think would be happening now? Because we didn't have any numbers.
No, it should have prepared us 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. That when we go on the polls on the 8th of August, we'll start giving you official figures on the 10th. And then they give us those reasons so that we are prepared for that. But still, it beats any rational thinking as to why it can take up to 48 hours later and you don't have this information. Because we have been told that some constituency returning officers are having challenges uploading these documents. If you've ever done an email and uploaded a document, it doesn't take 5 days. It takes 5 seconds to do that. Now, coming back to the germane question you're asking.
Yeah, it looks like you're running away from discussing these provisional results.
No, I've already given my position, because as far as I'm concerned, those are just merely numbers.
No
We have
results.
been merely numbers. The only time you can start making decisions is when you see those numbers attached to that instrument lawyers refer to as 34B. So when we see 34B, and maybe the news conference they are going to have at 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe Chebukati should tell us that we've gone through maybe 100 34Bs, and these are the results. So that the people who are suspecting that there is mischief going on at IBC can look at those verified 34Bs,
All
and then NASA can
Fair
compare
enough.
and the Jubilee can compare. But going back to the issue you raised earlier on, for Governor Lusaka, I think he's having probably a nasty day, because that was the biggest challenge for Wetangula in Western Kenya. It's not even the MPs. For him, it was the biggest challenge was Lusaka. But the fact that Jubilee has got a number of MPs, maybe it begins to tell you that the democracy is beginning to grow. But again, we can take those facts to the bank when we are told that these are the official results, when they've been given the certificates. And going back to...
So you still think this could change?
Yeah, you know the way they say, there's a Victorian saying that it's not yet over till the fat woman dances. The fat woman has not yet started dancing or singing. Then now we can have a final confirmation on that. I mean, the big question is, why can't IBC stream 34B so that all of us are able to see it on
is coming in, because you can easily tell that when Kisumu comes, anything from Kisumu comes in, there is supposed to be a serious increase in the NASA presidential candidates tally, you know. And when Kiambu comes in, because there is this, of course, this narrative going out that Kiambu is the equivalent of 4 constituencies elsewhere. So you need to see that boost. So the worry has been, there is no way we can track these numbers, and it stagnates.
Let me ask you
if
this,
you're going to
Desmond.
set that agenda, you need to have a way you can track it back.
In the run-up to the elections, when we were speaking about this KIEMS, the Kenya Integrated Elections Management System, and its 3 major functions, voter identification, and of course the electronic transmission of results. What did you have in mind that we would have for this electronic transmission of results, vis-a-vis what we are seeing right now at Bomas?
I actually had in mind whatever we are having, yeah? Whatever we are seeing right now. What I didn't expect was that it would come without giving me some sort of a clear picture of where these results are coming from, you know. So that is the biggest challenge that I think I've grappled with. But to the extent that it was meant to help us identify the voters, I think it did its job. That was very perfect. Now, where we are getting lost is basically the transmission, you know. And remember, the IBC made it clear that there are 2 ways they're going to transmit. One, they're going to transmit the text message. And then secondly, they're going to scan the document. And I think the impression that most of us got, and in my interaction with IBC in many quarters, was that they'll have scanners. So immediately the Form 34B is signed by the agents, it will be scanned, pinned, and relayed to a portal, to the extent that anyone would be able to tell that this is coming from Suna East, where I come from. And then I can easily tell this is what President Uhuru Kenyatta got in Suna East. But we are in a situation where now the text came before the scanned document. And the scanned document was not even, we are not so sure that it is coming electronically. And I mean, the beauty of it is that it is going to come, you know.
IBC are saying that it is heavy, heavy data.
It is heavy data, and I think what this man was saying is that when you are sending an email, you attach. I'm also tempted to believe that there are few of these guys who are involved who may not even have the expertise to do these things that we consider very simple.
This was what do you think?
The last point is when has made cannot go unchallenged. IBC said they trained all their returning officers. They were in 5-star hotels in Nairobi. They were trained to use these facilities. Now, if scanning these documents and sending it in Nairobi is one of the key components of the electoral process, it's beyond reason. I mean, you cannot even begin to imagine that there's a returning officer who doesn't have capacity to scan a document, upload it, and press a button, send to Nairobi. Now, my expectation for these results were that in a constituency, say Westlands, as soon as the polls have been closed, people will go into a room and start counting the ballots, probably starting with the presidential ballots, and then they confirm everything, they sign the requisite forms, and maybe 6 hours later, the constituency returning officer comes on board, invites journalists who are probably dozing away that we are about to make an announcement, then he announces, he says presidential results, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, 10,000. Raila Odinga, 10,000. Others, he gives the figures of the others. Some of them have conceded today, and you're wondering why they are conceding, because they are not material. So having done that, then he takes a copy, he goes to the notes board, he pins it. And then he scans, that document comes to Nairobi. So that from the time he's making the announcement, Bomas, they should be in receipt of that document, maybe in an hour's time.
All right.
And then they do the tally, and then, you know, they do a basic matrix on a spreadsheet. Then they start showing us so that we can know Westlands has already declared who was won the presidency, so we are able to know. You know, for instance, what Esbon was talking about, it's basic common sense. If the results coming from, say, Bondo, you would expect Raila Odinga to have a quick surge. If it's the results coming from Gatundu, you would expect Uru to have a surge. But from the time IBC started posting the results, the difference was just 11%. So you're wondering, I mean, were we, as voters in Kenya, because I had the opportunity of voting, were we programmed to vote in a particular way that for every candidate there was just going to be a difference of 11%? Right. Now, that's the mischief that has not been cured.
All right, good points. I want us to discuss with this, to continue with this. Let me give you before.
Yeah, I mean...
and Javas has been very...
Yeah, I think when you talk about returning officers, training, and all this, I mean, I just have to respond to this. I'm a teacher by profession, and I teach at the highest level called a university. And, the training that we give students is not commensurate to what we expect from them. There is individual difference. So you cannot say that if training took place at five-star hotels, everyone is supposed to score an A in terms of transmission. I think that is far from the point. There are challenges that come at the heat of the moment. That is why an exam that is outside there is easier than an exam that you're doing. So there are probably, you have a situation where because of the heat of the moment, a few of them had challenges. And when you have challenges and you have, agents, a place like Kisii, where you have a parliamentary seat, you have like 37 contestants. You can imagine what the returning officer is going through, So we cannot say that because they were trained, they have to submit. But be it as it may, I want to say that so long as all these things come to Nairobi, just like Secretary Kerry said, that the authority still remains Form 34B.
Well, yeah,
irrespective of how it
yes, I get it.
lands
But you see,
at
what does this point to? Is that maybe moving forward after this election, it may be necessary for IBC to consider training maybe 6 months in advance to an election, so that even if it's a question of doing a serious dry run, it gets to be done way in advance and anomalies fixed. And then you see, if these individuals get to be introduced to equipment, for example, these schemes, a month to an election, generally, they are not well equipped. They need to understand this, so that in case of anything, just like if somebody has procured a laptop and they get to use it for a very long time, in case of any challenge, they have understood it very well. So IBC may want to consider doing thorough training, but also way in advance. Another thing, of course, that has highly been given much attention, which we may need to flag, is, for example, look at the constant number of the rejected or the spoiled votes each election, the upward of 500,000. We're going to hit possibly 500,000 mark or more in this election. That's 500,000 wasted votes, and which means also IBC may want to invest much more in civic education so that it changes this dynamic.
All right. Away from the presidential tally, which this must insist, we wait and see what the IBC announces tomorrow morning at 5. But let's talk about other elections or elective positions across the country where we have continued to